I'm Bridget Owens, and you're listening to the Waxing Soul podcast. Join me on an exploration of mindful modern magic, a journey towards deeper understanding of self and transformative individual spirituality. It's November 5th, 2020, and on today's episode, we'll be discussing the ways we shut ourselves off from seeing and recognizing paths to manifestation that don't fit our expectations, why we shouldn't try to micromanage the universe, and how to train your brain to see greater possibilities. Are you ready to grow your soul? Let's get going. Welcome back, and thank you for joining me again on the podcast. It's my favorite time of year, and I hope everybody had a wonderful Samhain. Astrologically speaking, it's winter now, so which for me is the most spiritually potent season of the year, which is why I chose to start this podcast last week, just in time for what I consider my spiritual new year. So anyway, last week I debuted this podcast by talking about intentions, and I talked about how for a long time I'd fixated on a specific career path as a way to achieve a certain lifestyle. And I'll be super blunt, I wanted to feel popular and respected, right? I wanted to be the kind of person who had cool friends, who wanted to come over and be around me. And, I thought I knew what it would take to get there. And I also talked last week about how bad we are as humans at stringing together cause and effect relationships. Now, over time, I realized a couple of things personally. So first, I realized that I had developed this belief that people who had the kind of life and the kind of social life that I wanted had things like, that I didn't have, like money and fame. So in my mind, that was the most logical path to what I wanted. And second, I realized that there were so many ways to get there. I mean, really, having a home I was proud to entertain in and a group of friends to entertain is, achievable without lots of other steps, right? I mean, it seems so simple, but me realizing that I was focusing on the wrong thing came as kind of a shock to me at the time. Anyway, it was a super important lesson on my spiritual path. Reinforced by another story that I'll tell really quick. When I first learned years ago about sigil spells, I decided to do a little experiment to, test the technique because I'm a skeptic at heart. So I did a handful of sigil spells for things that were, really inconsequential. Nothing I cared too deeply about. So if it didn't work or if it worked in some kind of weird way, it would be no big deal. And one of the spells, so I had gone to an event where I was supposed to get, and this is going to sound silly, but I was supposed to get a free bra. I know it sounds weird, but they didn't have my size and they were supposed to ship one to me since they couldn't give me one there. So I did a spell to basically call that bra to me because I honestly doubted that they were going to remember to send it. I figured they had forgotten all about those of us who they didn't have any in stock for at the time, and that, so I would call that to me and see if that would work. And just for icing on the cake, just to, as one of those, I'll be sure that it works if this is right, that I added that it should be pink. So I did the spell, but I didn't mention the event or anything in that intention statement because that intention statement needed to be very concise and very short. So long story short, that particular bra never came. Maidenform forgot about me. But at the time, my wife, not knowing anything about the spell because, telling people would, ruin the test, she was visiting her parents. Her mom took her shopping. They were buying her clothes. And so she, they bought her a bra, so she picked me one out as well. And lo and behold, she came home with this surprise pink bra for me, which, is weird, right? Like, we don't usually buy bras as travel souvenirs. And, none of my bras had ever really been pink until then. So of all the things that I would expect my wife to pick out for me, a pink bra isn't one. But there it was. It wasn't the way I envisioned it, but it was totally what I had asked for in the spell. It was within those parameters. So magic. And there were a couple of other spells in that little experiment group, which I did actually, that came to pass, but not in the way that I envisioned when I did them. So here's the thing. Manifestation and magic are attractive concepts to us because we love the thought of the ability to make our desires happen by our own, thinking or alignment or whatever. But somewhere in there, we have this annoying tendency to micromanage the process and be super demanding and particular about how those things should happen. So, despite what you've probably been told, persistent insistence on an end goal is not the key to success, especially when it comes to challenging or really unlikely goals. So, sure, we've got examples of people who apparently made something happen by just really sticking with it and pushing everything as hard as possible. But for every one of those, there are countless others who were relentless and driven and ended up failing and bitter. And it's true for manifestation and magic too. So for every person who, swears that the key is persistent focus and specificity and doing things just right, there are countless others who are trying everything and not getting the results they want. And the problem isn't that manifestation and magic don't work. Although I will get to this in other episodes. It doesn't work the way you think that it does. But it goes back to intention. But it also has to do with our need to control how things happen. We can't actually micromanage the universe. And if we're hell-bent on one particular path to whatever our goals are, we make it so that nearly every opportunity that's gonna pop up, all kinds of alternative paths to that goal, are going to go by unnoticed. So this episode is really going to be about how to open yourself up to success rather than closing yourself off from it. Here's the thing about magic and other spiritual workings. We're not turning to that to get things done the mundane, normal way. Even if the intention is mundane, everyday stuff, we're not looking for or expecting things to proceed in just, a normal, everyday way if we're turning to spirituality to get it done. If I'm totally confident that I know everything I need to know to ace a test, I'm probably not going to spend time trying to manifest that, good test score by magical means. But if I'm working spiritually to manifest a good score on a test, it probably means I'm pretty sure that any studying or preparing that I can do the usual way isn't likely to be enough. I'm turning to spiritual means to either, settle my emotions around the situation, or to try and turn the odds in my favor, or to clear barriers to success out of my way. It might be a lot of different things that I'm trying to manifest, but for those things, I don't have good mundane methods, to get there. So here's why it's important to be more open, more flexible, less controlling when it comes to our intentions. If we had a really strong grasp on how to make these things, come to be, we wouldn't need spiritual methods to get it done. And not just that, but we actually reduce the chance of our intentions coming to pass if we keep stepping in the way of whatever those spiritual methods, are, or if we keep interfering with the spiritual processes at work. So, as a strong feminist woman who knows a few things and has, a decently useful skill set, one of my biggest pet peeves is people explaining things to me that I already know, or giving me advice when there's no real sign that I need the advice. And especially when I've been, given a task or a job to do, being micromanaged and second guessed is just the worst. It's super annoying, right? And that's not a bad metaphor for how we often deal with the spiritual forces that we call on when, we need assistance from outside ourselves. We put our intention out there, we'll, do a spell, do a working, whatever, and then we kind of impatiently wait for things to fall together. divination to check up on how things will turn out, or, wanting or, looking for signs and signals and reassurance, and, only accepting idealistic returns on our efforts, ignoring things that don't fit our vision of how things, were supposed to play out. But, if we're calling upon the universe to help us, we have to let go of the hows and the whys and not try to control or micromanage the way in which it happens. It's kind of like hiring a contractor to do a job, which, may not be a metaphor that fits well in your personal cosmology, but I think it's the best one in mine. If I hire a plumber to fix my sink, it's because I either don't know how to do it or I don't have the resources to do it. So the more demands if I hire a plumber and then make a bunch of demands on them, the more I hover and pick at their methods and, assert control, the more likely I am to be completely dissatisfied with the result. And the more likely they are to never, ever answer my call again, right? So, anyone who's ever hired a contractor to do a big project knows that it's a literal miracle to make it all the way through with no surprises, no changes to the budget, no adjustments, exactly as planned. So especially when we give a task over to, the powers of the universe, we have to let go and leave that process alone, to be open to the results in whatever form they take. But more than it just being a good idea to open yourself up to all the possibilities when it comes to your spiritual workings, that is actually a part of the mechanism by which it all works. There has to be a mindset shift. There has to be a letting go so that your own blinders come off and your subconscious is tuned to see all the potential answers to your requests. So, how you notice hiring signs more when you're looking for a job, or when you buy a car and then suddenly you start noticing all the other same type cars on the road. And they were there all the time, but you're only just now noticing because your subconscious now is tuned to that, right? And a super huge part of magic is opening your eyes in that kind of way. So if you're really focused on your deep intention, not your surface intention, but your deep intention down to your subconscious, then you're going to be subconsciously tuned to see more of that intention. And that mindset reset doesn't happen if you stay focused on one particular path towards your goal, or if you have the wrong goal in mind from the beginning, like I talked about last week. So if you struggle with your magical practice, if you struggle with manifestation, the problem very well could be, tied back to what your intention is and your openness to the many ways that your positive return might come about, right? The workings themselves aren't complicated. We just have to get our mindset and our approach right. I'm a big believer in the idea that the skills and the mindsets that make us better spiritual practitioners bleed over into mundane life too. Because really, there's not the kind of separation there that you might expect. It's all the same thing. So shifting our mindset to be more open to a wide range of possibilities for getting what we want in life isn't just good for our spiritual practices, it's just a generally good mind space to exist in. So being more open to, unexpected opportunities, it just increases your likelihood of building whatever it is you're aspiring to in life. So how do you change that part of your mindset and outlook? Well, practice makes perfect. So I've got a little exercise for you to help change your thought patterns and get past the restrictions and whatever limitations you have on the way that you see the world. It's about brainstorming and training your mind to imagine more and more pathways towards a single goal. So now there's one central rule to brainstorming, and this is super important. I learned this in gifted school when I was a kid. The thing about brainstorming is that when you're in the brainstorming phase itself, when you're actually throwing out ideas, the only way to really have a free thinking process is to consider all ideas acceptable. No matter how silly, no matter how awful, no matter how unlikely, you write down every single one, literally every single one. And it's not because all ideas are good. If you're brainstorming to actually, find a solution to something, after the phase of gathering all the possible ideas, that you can think of, you do start eliminating the ones that, don't fit and aren't good for the question at hand. But the point at which you evaluate the value of each idea comes later. And in this case, we're not worried about that. We're just going to practice the brainstorming part. And the reason why you accept all ideas as acceptable at this part is that even the dumb ideas have a purpose. There's a reason they popped into your brain. So maybe they lead to something more plausible. Maybe they clear, some of your distracting thoughts so that you can move on mentally. But it's super important to be able to free your mind from the subconscious judgment and let your brain run totally free. And not all of us are very good at that. Lots of things have trained us to censor ourselves, to judge our own ideas, through what we think others might think, that kind of thing. It's something that we do subconsciously, sometimes consciously, and it impacts our spiritual work too. We make those judgments without thinking about it. So instead of giving into that, we're going to brainstorm. I've got a download for you, which you can find at bridgetowens.com/podcast. And it's intended to be kind of cut up into small cards. So you can print it out, cut it out. And each one has a little prompt on it, starting with some intention, some goal, and it doesn't have to be a spiritual thing here. This can just be whatever you're trying to manifest it spiritually in mundane life, whatever it is, whatever you're working towards. And it's important to distinguish, it's not about process, it's a goal. It's a super important distinction. So lots of things that we think of as goals aren't really goals. Like, I'm going to do yoga every morning isn't a goal. That's not an intention. It's a methodology. The reasons why you think a morning yoga practice will benefit you, the things that you think you're going to get out of doing that is your goal. And, see last week's episode for more on that distinction. But I will say that if the exercise doesn't make sense with the goal that you're thinking of, it's probably not a goal. Like, you can't go, what's another way that it could happen that I do yoga every morning? Like, you can brainstorm other ways to be more flexible or other ways to reduce your stress, but you can't really think of other ways to do morning yoga. You're going to get up and do morning yoga, right? So it's not really a goal that you're thinking of in that case. Here's another good distinction between the two. A goal is about being or having, but it's not about doing. So like being healthier or having a six-pack is a goal, but doing yoga isn't a goal. But whatever. So you start with a goal or an intention, and the prompts are there to get you thinking creatively about how that goal might be obtained in lots and lots of other ways. Some of these prompts are going to seem silly, some may be kind of out of left field, but that's the point. You take the end goal and maybe see how many you can fill out all at once. Maybe you do it once a day. Whatever you want to do, maybe fold them up, keep them in a jar somewhere until you reach the goal, and then you kind of look back, or don't keep them, just go through the exercise. Whatever you want to do, it's all about letting your mind open itself to seeing possibilities and potential, to open up that capacity in your brain. And feel free to keep going, add your own ideas, stretch your brain legs or whatever, if brain legs are a thing. So again, you can find that download at bridgetowens.com/podcast. And, if you get good at this, if you make a habit to kind of think in a much more expansive way, to see more ideas and potential around you, when the universe answers your requests in unexpected ways, then you're far more likely to actually see it and notice. And that right there is an abundance mindset. That's positive thinking, right? All of the mindsets that people strive to have, if you're able to see infinite pathways to any destination, it becomes harder to feel limited or pessimistic about the world around you. Thank you so much for listening. Look for a new episode of Waxing Soul every Thursday. You can find us on bridgetowens.com/podcast and wherever you usually listen to podcasts. If you can't find us at your usual podcast spot, drop a message to bridget@bridgetowens.com. All materials and resources, except the music, are copyright Bridget Owens. Music is Dreamcatcher by Kevin MacLeod, used under Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 International. Find out more at bridgetowens.com/podcast. Many, many thanks to my readers, listeners, friends, mentors, inspirations, and my family. None of this, of course, happens in a bubble. Until next week, blessed be and be good to yourself.